Hey everybody, it's Greg LaBeouf here with you. Hey, listen, I wanted to jump on. I want to share another episode of the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. I got something very interesting for you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'll make a statement and I'm going to also ask a question. Maybe I'll start with my statement. Is it fair to expect a beginner student to be able to defeat their instructor? Okay, so that's the statement. Is it fair to expect a beginner student in a martial art, in a self-defense program, to be able to beat their instructor? Okay, and so then let me now just phrase that in the form of a question. Can the student beat the instructor? Right? Can your student, and again, I mean a beginning student, not just a student that's been around for 30 years, can a beginner student beat their instructor? Listen, I'm going to tell you, not only I'm going to answer the statement, yes, a beginner student should be able to beat the instructor. That should be the whole goal of training. Okay, so I'm gonna cut to my intro back in 60 seconds, and I'm going to explain to you why it's so important. As a matter of fact, it's mandatory in self-defense. In personal protection, it is mandatory that the student is able to beat the instructor.
Many people understand that they can at any time become the target of a violent criminal assault. These same people know that they have a life, family, and property worth defending. Criminals understand that violence is its own language. Violence is not the sport of competition. Violence is not the art of fighting. Violence is about one thing: destruction. There are those who believe that violence, even in self-defense, is morally wrong. Then there are good people like you who know that defending yourself, family, and others, as well as your property, is not only a personal right, but a duty within a civilized society. Understand, violent assaults are won before they occur. People who learn strategy survive. People who do not will not. For those brave people who believe life is precious and worth defending,
welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Okay, listen, I wanted to jump on today because I wanted to do an episode and I want to answer a question, right? I made a statement and asked a question. The statement was, is it fair to expect a beginner student to be able to beat their instructor? Okay, and then I just formulated that into a question. Can a beginning student in a self-defense art or a personal protection art, whatever you want to call it, is it fair, can they beat their instructor? And here's the thing. Most people viscerally go, no, you cannot beat your instructor, right? And if you can beat the instructor, then the instruction is shit. Because obviously it automatically means that the instructor doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. That's the automatic assumption. If the student, a brand new student with no previous experience, can beat the instructor, then the instructor is shit. Then the training is shit, right? But here's what I want to do. I want to throw this out. What if I told you that the student should be able to beat the instructor? They should have a chance at beating the instructor right from day one. That should be the whole goal of personal protection training, is to get the student to be able to beat the instructor. Why? Because the instructor represents some sort of standard, right? Some person that has a knowledge or an education. Like in my case, we're talking about violence. So me as the instructor, having done this for 30 years, right? I mean, I've dedicated my entire life to weaponizing and training for 30 years. Yet what I want to tell you is this. My students from day one, what I am doing is giving them a chance to be able to beat me. Now, it's not about me. I'm not a violent criminal. I'm not the one that's going to attack them, but I want them to understand that, listen, I've been studying this for 30 years, and I'm going to show you, right? I've studied violence. It's my entire life is to understand how to weaponize against violence, to think like criminals think, to study criminality. And from day one, I want to give my students the opportunity to be able to beat me, because if they can beat me, they can beat the violent criminal. And most people right away, it's like, oh, this is counterintuitive, right? Like, what? Then you must be pretty fucking shitty, because how is it possible for somebody with no experience to be able to beat you? Now, listen, there's always a chance. I mean, anything can happen, right? Anything is possible. I'm not talking about some wild, off-the-cuff, lucky thing where the guy maybe could beat you because you slip and hit your head on the fucking sidewalk or something. No, I'm talking about giving them a legitimate opportunity to be able to beat the instructor. So let's break it down a little bit. If you look at combative, look at what we call conventional training. Look at combat sports or look at martial arts. Understand that most of this is predicated off fighting. And when you're talking about fighting, you're often talking about one-on-one. Right? You're talking about sport, you're talking about rules, you're talking about, and remember, this does not have to be like the rules within a given sport. There are a lot of martial arts that aren't sport arts. And they will do mass attack and stuff, but here's the thing. They're teaching from the confines of an art, right? So you're saying, listen, this is our art. So we're gonna train in an art. Everyone that's there training is training in the art, and we're going to compete against each other using the art. You're in these limitations. Taekwondo spars Taekwondo. Boxers spar boxers, right? MMA guys fight MMA guys. And say, oh no, they do some cross training. An MMA guy can spar a boxing guy. With what? Boxing. You see it right now. A lot of MMA guys are taking boxing fights. Conor McGregor took on Mayweather in an exhibition, and they boxed. They didn't do MMA. They boxed. So just stick with me for a second, right? But when you are talking about sport versus sport or art versus art, what you're talking about is the competition. And so if you turn around and say you got a brand new student, and that student comes in and goes, I've never trained before, he's never going to beat the instructor. Because why? Because to beat the instructor, you have to test yourself in the domain that the instructor is dominant. So if I had no boxing experience and I go into a boxing gym, and first day it's like, well, I guess I'll spar the boxing coach, and we get in the ring and we compete against each other. Do I have a chance of beating him? I mean, maybe if I was, 6'8", 395 pounds, I might not have any boxing experience, but I've been in a ton of street fights, and we glove up, and the boxing coach happens to be, 130 pounds, even though he's a professional fighter, 130 pounds. I'd probably still lose to him, you know what I mean, despite the size and weight advantage. But the point is, you go, there's a chance. I'm not talking about that. In the confines of competing against an instructor, student versus an instructor, within the confines of their chosen methodology or process of fighting, the student almost has no chance. Matter of fact, let's expand this out a little bit. Most students would not have a chance of beating their instructor a year in, 5 years in, and for many people, 10 or 15 years in. They still have no chance of beating their instructor. Now, especially if their instructor is continuing to train. He doesn't hit a point where injuries take him out, or he's just, now I teach, I haven't done it. No, we're talking about most good coaches are consistently training. Even if they can't fight anymore, if it's a sport art, they're still training. They're still out there working their skills and developing their skills. Okay? So the idea is that most students, 1 year, 5 year, 10 year, 15 years, still aren't going to be, they're never going to reach the level that their instructor did. They're probably never going to be able to beat their instructors. And there's a problem with this, right? And what's the problem with that? You understand, most, when I go around to like martial arts gyms, MMA gyms, you're in sport gyms, you can look and even go to one of the most, very successful gyms, and they have 300 students. Out of those 300 students, you got 10 or so, maybe 10 or so, that are like the higher level elite guys. Like some are fighting semi-pro. There's one or two maybe that have it in them to have a really good pro career. Okay. But you have the majority of people in that gym, they're never going to attain the level of even a really, really skilled high level amateur athlete. They're never going to come close to being able to reach the level of their coach. So they're never going to be able to beat their coach. Again, unless the coach is taken out of injury, he quits training, he gets old, he gets fat, he gets lazy, and he completely switches over to just, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I don't do any of the fighting anymore. Then maybe the student has a chance. But even then, the student will probably never hit the heights that the instructor did, or that the top students do. Why is that? Because when you're talking about most martial arts, sport, traditional arts, things like that, if you had to fight the instructor, the new student loses because it's predicated off technique. If your Taekwondo is going to spar Taekwondo, well, within that dynamic, you're going to use kicks predominantly. And the new guys, you've never showed me how to effectively throw a Taekwondo kick. So maybe I've got the flexibility and all that stuff, but I don't have any technique. And so the instructor is going to beat the student. And everyone goes, well, this doesn't even make sense for your tumble grade, because that's the journey of martial arts. But understand something. When it comes to violence, when it comes to weaponizing, from day one, my whole goal is to get my students to be able to beat me. Right? Not just by some luck, but by design. The student should have the opportunity to be able to beat the instructor right from day one. And then, yes, as time allows, you increase their likelihood. You increase their odds of being able to defeat the instructor. Right? And let me ask you this question. So I'll do it two ways. If you had to get in the ring with an MMA fighter, and this is your day one, and they're let's just say they've been training for 10 years. Not even the instructor, been training for 10 years, very, very committed, training for 10 years, and you had to get in the ring and you had to spar them or fight them in an MMA match. Just for fun, an exhibition match, but you had to get in there and spar them. Day one, no experience, and you guys are equal in size and strength, relatively equal in size and strength. So how would you do it? Well, it'd be pretty tough. Why? Because one, do you have the athleticism? Do you have inordinately higher level of attributes? You're just a better athlete, even though you have no experience. And this guy's been training for 10 years, very dedicated to his training. But you just walking in off the street, you're a bit of a gifted athlete. That might help you a little bit. But again, you have no training, no technique, no understanding. But maybe that gives you a little advantage. But you're probably still going to lose. The second thing is you go, well, yeah, but I have had no time to train. I haven't put in the focus of time. That's a disadvantage. I don't have the same passion and focus. If you're just starting it versus someone that's been training 10 years, the passion and focus has not developed yet. It's not even there. So again, these things put you at a disadvantage. You haven't had the persistence or the dedication to move through this. So all of these things you see where you're going to lose this match. Okay? And if you do happen to win by some miracle, that's exactly what it is. It's a miracle. It's the exception, not the rule. So then the question is, well, how would you beat them? So let's flip over to talking about violence. If I have a brand new student come into me, a brand new client, like 99% of my clients, they have the desire, but they have no skill. They have the desire to want to protect and defend themselves and their family, but they have no skill, no experience in it. They've never done this before. So they come in, and the question is, okay, right in an hour from now, you're going to be in a life and death fight. Your family is there with you. It's not only you at risk and at jeopardy, but it's you, it's your spouse, it's your children. And in 1 hour, you're going to face a dedicated, focused, experienced, violent criminal, a predatory individual that is absolutely bent on taking your life and the life of your family. Doesn't give a fuck. Utter destruction. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's got the experience. That's who you're going to face in an hour. What would you do? See, in this situation, what would you do? Because if we go back to the MMA thing, say you got to get in the ring with this guy. This guy's been training for 10 years. He's a high-level amateur athlete. You're like, I've never done this before, but they put you in the cage. And you say, it's an exhibition match. Don't worry about going there. How do you beat them? You're fucked. Because you say, well, what can I do? I mean, we're doing MMA. So, I mean, he's going to try to punch and kick and clinch up and ground and all that stuff. So that's what I have to do. I have to try to, I guess he's a great striker. I guess I got to try to enter in and clinch him and take him to the ground. But I don't know how to do any of that. And even if I got him to the ground, I don't know the fuck I'm doing on the ground. So it's like, you don't have options other than to say, well, I guess I better start fucking training and get better. But he's 10 years ahead of you. So unless you're, again, some sort of amazingly, naturally gifted athlete where you just have a superior mix of attributes, you're born that way, you're the exception, not the rule, then maybe, you do in 3 years what took him 10 years. But otherwise, I don't have any options. But flashback, in 1 hour, you're going to face an individual that is hell-bent on destroying you and your family. Well, here's the thing. One is you say, well, fuck it, I'd get a weapon. Now, why does the average person's brain go to saying, well, I'd get a weapon? Because you go, well, I don't know how to punch and kick. Like I'm forcing a problem onto you. So what's your way out of the problem? You say, well, I'd talk my way out of it. No, I just wouldn't agree. No, it's not. None of that's going to work. You have to engage. This person is going to physically murder you and your family. So right away, out of necessity, out of desperation, out of panic, out of fear, whatever it is, you're going to go, well, I'd fucking pick up a weapon. Say, okay, well, that's not bad right now, right? So what weapon would you pick up? And you might say, well, a gun would be great, but I don't have a fucking gun. And I don't have time to go get a gun. And if you do have a gun or ask again, maybe you get a gun. But you say, well, I don't have time to get. Okay, so what else would you do? You say, well, I could grab a knife out of the butcher block. Right? Okay, so good. So you grab a knife. Great. Now, does that give you a chance at surviving this? Yeah, it does. Of course it does. Why? Because you go, well, at least I didn't have to depend on skills that aren't there. In the MMA ring, I can't grab the knife. Because it doesn't exist within that paradigm. Right? So this guy, 10 years, punching, kicking, clinching, ground fighting, in the MMA world, and I have none of those experience yet, I have none of those skills yet because it's day one. You see, not only do I have almost no chance of beating that guy, but my chance at beating this individual won't come for many years, won't come for hundreds, if not thousands of hours of time and dedicated focus and passion and persistence. That's how long it's going to take to get to that decade plus of skill level. Yet the second we're talking about violence, you say, well, fuck, I don't have any of that. Well, this guy's coming to murder you and your family. And you're like, well, what the fuck do I do? So out of desperation, out of fear, you go, well, fuck it, I'll grab a knife. And why is that? Because we get an understanding. A child, a 10-year-old with a knife, an 8-year-old with a knife, and loses complete fucking mental control, has a complete blackout, a full-grown adult, you could have a problem. You're probably going to get cut. You get what I mean? So the knife has this way of equalizing. But it's still just a small chance, because you might say, well, yeah, but the bad guys, what if there's 2 of them or 3 of them? Or what if they've got a knife? Or what if they've got guns? You brought a knife to a gunfight. The point is that we can still think. So now he says, I'd grab a knife. I say, that's really good. That's a great start point. But here's the thing. They have a gun. And now the guy's like, oh, fuck. Well, I don't have any skills. It's my first day. I don't know how to punch and kick. I don't know how to clinch. I don't know how to ground fight. So I thought, well, I better pick up a weapon. So I grabbed a knife, and now you're telling me, shit, they got a gun. And they got knives. There's 2 of them. They got a gun and they got a knife. And now you're like, well, fuck, I'm back to desperation. Are you out of it? You have no chance? No. Why? Because, okay, solve the problem. They got a gun. They got a knife. There's multiple opponents. What can you do? And all of a sudden the person thinks a little bit, and the guy sits, and all of a sudden the guy goes, oh shit, you know what I could try to do? What if I developed a ruse? What if I developed a ruse? And what would you say to that? I say, what do you mean a fucking ruse? What ruse are you going to develop? So well, this guy's going to show up in an hour. These guys are going to show up in an hour, and they're going to attempt to murder me and my family. But what if I developed some sort of ruse that when they got there, they thought one thing, it looked like one thing, but really I was cunning and underhanded, and I did something different. You see, a serial killer, look at Ted Bundy. He developed a ruse. Why? Just to make it even easier, just to more guarantee success that he would be able to successfully abduct and murder these women. Did he need a ruse? Not necessarily, because he was, he wasn't an overly huge guy, but he was a big, stronger, he was stronger than most of his victims. But what he wanted to do was he wanted to minimize any chance for defense. He wanted to lower the defense mechanisms, lower the shields of his intended target so that he could maximize the element of surprise and the damage. Well, he developed a ruse. He would pretend he had a broken arm and then be trying to load a kayak on top of his car or move a piece of furniture or something. And of course, someone would come along and go, oh, look at this poor guy. And of course, he was a good-looking, well-spoken individual. All of the things, he had his look, all of these elements were part of his ruse to lure them in. Does this track? So you see, this guy now goes, I could develop a ruse. Yes, now, listen, what kind of ruse could you come up with? Well, we could, thousands of different ideas of ruses that we could come up with that could lure bigger, stronger people with bad intentions, armed. We could lure them into a ruse. And would that increase our likelihood of being able to beat this violent criminal? Yes. So, if somebody comes in and starts with me day one, right? Day one, and the first thing I do is say, listen, I'm the instructor. I've been doing this for 30 years. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start teaching you all of the techniques. Now, the problem with that is that I know these techniques. I've been training these techniques for 30 years. So I'm going to start teaching the techniques. And then guess what? Understand your place. If we sparred even, never mind a fight, if we sparred, you cannot beat me because my technical experience is so deep. my line familiarization, my body mechanics, my weight transfer, the placement action, the follow-through, the emotional content. My attributes over 30 years have been developed to be able to allow me to implement these techniques at a very high level. So if I'm going to start teaching you techniques, you have no chance of defeating me, not only in day one, but you probably won't have a chance defeating me for 15 to 20 years. Because I don't train like this is a hobby. I train like this is my life and this is my profession, and that's why I've trained for 30 years. But you understand how do I sit here and say, I'm a self-defense instructor. I teach people how to defend themselves. People say, yeah, but they don't need to defend themselves from someone like you. Because these violent criminals, they haven't been training for 30 years, Greg. Say, listen, understand something. Violence is its own fucking language. It's not the art of fighting. It's not the sport of competition. These guys have, a lot of these individuals, they've learned, they've grown up in violent environments. There is a necessity in their world to fucking be able to defend, to attack, to destroy, to kill. So they have experience. Many of these individuals have more than 30 years worth of experience of destroying human lives. It's just part of their fucking world. So no, they do need to be able to understand from day one how to create opportunity and chance to be able to beat someone with 30 years experience. Because you're saying you got to be able to beat a violent criminal who has a fucking history of violence against other human beings, of destruction. That's who you're going to face. You're not facing, I love it when people say like, I learned jiu-jitsu and it's the Gracies have their combatives program, and it's like, learn the jiu-jitsu because against somebody who doesn't know anything, the jiu-jitsu is very effective. And it's 100% that is true, especially in a fight. Because that's the opposite of the equation that we're setting forward here. What if I'd been training jiu-jitsu for 3 years and some new guy comes in who never has any experience, and then me and him go to the center of the mat and we fight? And he's standing there and he doesn't know how to throw a punch, whatever. And so he tries to throw this awkward punch, and I just shoot in, grab him, hook his foot, put him on the ground. Now he's on his back. I'm in a position he's got no line familiarization with. I mount. He tries to push intuitively because that's what people do when they don't know what the fuck to do. And so I throw him in an armbar and go, greatest art in the world. Because it works against people that don't know what the fuck they're doing. And most people you're going to get into a fight with, which is antisocial aggression, it is one of the greatest arts in the world. It works because they don't know what they're doing. And they can be bigger and they can be stronger. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about what if now all of a sudden you find yourself in asocial violence, an individual who has 10, 15, 20-year history of criminal violence. This is not somebody who knows nothing. This is somebody who understands the language of violence, who got sentenced to 3 years in a prison system and ended up serving 5 or 6 because while in there, they used violence against other inmates, got proficient at it, killed and injured and inside of the prison system, perfected and honed their ability at violence, and now is out on the street. So you're not facing somebody that knows nothing. You're facing somebody that has a history. So again, from day one, how do I start training my students so that they can beat me? Because if they can beat me, then they can beat a violent criminal. At least they got a chance. And so let's flash again. What? What are you going to do when these guys coming out? Pick up a fucking weapon. Okay, perfect, but they have weapons and there's mass attack. Okay, shit. Well, I better develop a ruse. Okay, but what about this? What about all of a sudden if you say, okay, yes, develop a ruse. But what about using time? What about using location? Right? What about using position or using a moment of focus? Let me break this down for you. This guy's coming in an hour. These two guys are coming in an hour. They got a gun. They got a knife. They're going to be in an hour. They're going to attempt to murder your family. So guess what? Sit and wait. Wait the 60 minutes. They show up like a fucking challenger walking into your martial arts studio. They show up. There's the challenge. You go to the center of the room and you take the fight. You do the challenge match. What about you turn around and say, well, these fuckers are coming. Where are they now? Well, they're out getting prepared. Well, fuck waiting. I'm going to them. They think they're coming to murder me in 60 minutes, but I know this shit's happening. I'm going to go to them in 30 minutes. I'm going there right now in 5 minutes because I'm going to seize the initiative. I'm going to get the element of surprise. He said, well, now you're being the aggressor. Understand something, man. When people walk up to you and they have bad intentions and you're reading the body language, the behavior, the interpersonal communication, you start seeing them going up in the escalation continuum and these are bad guys in their posture and all this type of stuff. And you recognize and go, oh shit, this shit's going fucking physical. These guys, I'm devoid of choice in this situation. These guys are going to fucking kill me. This shit's going physical. It just hasn't happened yet. But we're 2 blinks away from these guys trying to murder me and my family. But if you can see that, read that, understand that, and accept the truth of what's in front of you, those 2 blinks away, you attack before those 2 blinks. You have seized some of that initiative. You now have the element of surprise. You are ambushing them versus letting them ambush you. That gives you a chance. One of my students comes in, and one of the first things I start teaching, we start teaching them about the time. Read it, understand the timeline. Because if something happens between you and me, and I'm escalating up to the point where I'm going to fucking try to murder you, physically assault you, and I'm boiling up to that point, and all the shit's going on my body, and motherfucking this and this, if you recognize that this is true and there is no way for you to remove yourself from that situation, if you get me before I cross that line, if you get me the blink before I step into that abyss, before I step into that physical assault, if you can read that, you have a chance. Because now I'm the victim of the ambush. You seized the initiative. But you got to learn how to read that to be able to do that. But let's go one step further. What about a ruse? Well, a ruse happens all the time because as I'm building up, this person feigns submission. This person, they have a ruse. They fake an injury. They pretend to speak a different language. There's a million different ruses that we teach people. It's like a fucking Trojan horse. You disguise it. Here's the gift to praise you. Here's what you want. This is congruous with what you want me to do. But reality is I got soldiers hidden inside of that horse. And in the middle of the night, they're going to open up, come out and slit throats. There's a ruse. This is why serial killers use ruses. And yet people so we teach them that ruse. We teach them how to control the timing and read what's about to happen. Because if you can see and understand what's about to happen, you can take a different action. You can get ahead of the action. If you understand what ruses actually work, Jesus, that makes complete sense, but I don't know ruse. I wouldn't be able, I don't think I'd be able to think of a creative ruse that a bad guy would believe in the heat of that moment. Well, no, you won't. But if you were trained beforehand, so day one, you're teaching them to understand and be able to control the timing of what's happening. See it for what it is. Because that'll allow you to take different action. Step two, I'm going to teach you ruses that work. And then look at the whole thing of the time. You go to them, whatever it is. You control the timeline. What about location? This guy wants to come. These people want to come and they want to assault me. Well, what location best serves them? You don't think bad guys dictate and control location? You don't think that they set up their ambush points in a location where they're isolated, in a location where there's very little chance of bystanders jumping in or help showing up or them being interrupted or them being caught on camera? Yes, control location. So why can't we do that? It's much easier for me to teach somebody how to read what's happening, control the time. It's so much easier for me to teach people the advantages and disadvantages and learn to control the location, right? What if I take the position, meaning what? What if you controlled the angle or the position that the assault started from? So these guys show up in an hour and they got a gun and they got a knife, but guess what? You're behind them, not in front of them. So what? How the fuck did I get behind them? Well, maybe your ruse allowed you to do that. Maybe because you controlled the time. These guys pull up in a car and they know you're in that building. And so they're sitting in the seat of their car and they're checking their guns. They're making sure they're loaded. They got all their shit. They're getting themselves jacked up. And then all of a sudden they open the door. They're looking at the building. Are you ready? You ready? They open the car door. And as the guy gets out and he goes to shut the door, gun still tucked in his waistband, but his hand's reaching for that. Boom! He gets a brick in the back of the fucking head. Whoa, you controlled the time. You controlled the location. They thought we're going in there. You moved the location to the parking lot and you controlled the position. They didn't see you sitting in another vehicle. They weren't worried about who else was in the parking lot because they weren't the ones being hunted, or so they thought. They're hunting. You're the prey. But now you switched it, so you got a superior position on them. This can be as powerful on a battlefield as having the high ground. If you got the high ground, that's a massive tactical advantage in many situations. So you control the position. Or what about the focus? Let's rewind for a second. I said, they get there, they drive up, we're going to get this fucking guy. They're checking their guns. They're in the car checking the guns, making sure they're loaded, or they're loading the bullets into the clip, or they're pulling the knife out and making sure the machete's sharp, or whatever it is. In that moment, they're focused. Their focus is on the gun, on the machete. Their focus is on undoing their seatbelt or shutting the car off. Whatever it is, in that moment, if you launched an ambush at the moment where their focus is distracted, their focus is caught in what we call a life factor moment, would that increase your odds of being able to beat them? Well, of course it would. Undeniably, of course it would. So let's extract this. How is it that I can get, on the very first day, I start teaching my students to be able to beat the instructor? Because if something happened and I had a mental snap and I became an imminent threat to that individual, and he happened to bring his wife and kids, it's day one, and he brings them and the whole family's there to train, and I have a psychotic break. 30 years of violence, 30 years of training. This person has no training, no experience. They're not some super athlete. They're an average guy, ordinary, average, maybe even slightly below average attributes. But the difference is this. In as little as even an hour, you can start sharing with this individual, start answering, how would they have a chance to beat me? And hopefully by this point, it's becoming very clear to you. They have to have different strategies, not different techniques, not better techniques, not better attributes. They have to have strategies. They have to, everything I'm talking about is what? They have to have been taught how to think evil. There's a playbook to that. Thinking evil, all human beings have the capacity to think evil, but not all human beings do. And in the moment when your life depends on it, it's not as easy as what you think it is. But if you've been trained to use the single greatest weapon that human beings carry, it's not a gun, it's not a knife, it's not a machete, it's not punches, it's not kicks, it's not arm bars, it's not triangle chokes, it's the human mind. And the human mind has a capacity to be fucking ruthless, especially in defense of its own life. Justified defense of its own life. But it is so powerful and it is so necessary that we are taught this stuff because we're disconnected with it. We don't have to walk around thinking ruthless and insidious. We have not developed the ruses. We have not developed the eye to read the timing and be a blink ahead of some violent piece of shit that's going to try to murder our entire family. Now, we're reactive. We're in sense of doubt. We're in like shock and awe that somebody could even do this. But that's where the weaponizing process has to shift. So again, let me just circle back here to answer making our statement, answering our question. Is it plausible that the beginning student should be able to beat the instructor? And on one side of that coin, within the martial arts, the combative arts, the sports, within that side of it, it's not plausible. Matter of fact, it is exactly what everybody would think. It's probably a sign your instructor is a fraud, right? He has not been training, because if you're going to get on a mat and roll with someone in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you've never done it, and unless, again, you're some phenomenal athlete or you outweigh him or outstrength him or you're an exception to the rule, you're not going to win that. You don't even have a fucking chance of winning that. The only thing that tells you might is a male ego. You don't have a chance getting in against a boxer or a kickboxer or a judo guy or a wrestler. You have no chance against them because of all the things that we've listed. You have not put in the time. You don't have the passion, the focus, the persistence, the dedication. You haven't learned the technique. You don't have the athleticism. Those things can all be developed, but they take a long time. But on the other side of the coin, when weaponizing or preparing for violence, it's not just my statement, is it important that the student be able to beat the instructor? Or then I ask the question, can a beginner student beat the instructor? When you're talking about violence, it's absolutely fucking mandatory that the student from day one be given the capacity to beat the instructor. You have to give the student from day one the capacity or the chance, the opportunity, and as high a level opportunity as you can make it, you have to be giving them that opportunity from day one. And hopefully you understand some of the ways that we can do that, because we didn't talk technique. Self-defense or personal protection instructors that start teaching technique from day one are holding and keeping their students down. Because a student that I start teaching technique to has no chance of beating me. But a student or a client that comes in day one and I start teaching them strategy, I start teaching them about a ruse, like I teach them the Trojan horse stuff, and I teach them the different ruse that they could use. I start teaching them about how to control time and location and position and focus. And most people go, what you're really saying, Greg, is you start teaching them how to fucking cheat. Yeah, I start teaching them how to think fucking evil, because when it's your life and the life of your children that's on the line from some violent criminal who has a history of destroying human life, yeah, I'm going to teach you how to think evil. I'm not worried about your fucking triangle choke. I'm not worried about your jab or your cross. Technique is down on the list. It is not the first thing. It plays a role, but it is not the first thing. All right, everybody. Hopefully you got some value out of this conversation and understand why it is so critically important that the instructor has to be teaching the student how to beat them. And that is not the paradigm that most people are using in the training world, in the self-defense and self-protection world today. No, most instructors, they don't want that. They rather stay on top of the mountain. They rather remain the guru, the sifu, the sensei, and they'd rather just teach techniques and teach drills and control all of the knowledge and pass it out sparingly and allow people to move through a process and keep them within their training organization, their culture, their business for 15, 20 years, moving through arts and all this type of bullshit. And they don't give a fuck about whether these people can actually defend themselves against violent predatory criminals that are looking to murder them and their entire families. When it comes to weaponizing, function first. Function over form. Function first. All right, everybody, that's it. Listen, if you enjoy our podcast, don't forget, subscribe wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and also leave us a rating if you can. That'd be great. That helps us reach more good people like you and helps them to weaponize. So that's it, everybody. Stay safe, stay weaponized. We will chat again soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. And listen, if you found this content valuable, here's 3 different ways that I can help you weaponize for free. First, grab a free copy of my ebook, The Education of a Weaponized Man. To get your free copy today, head to ebook.awakentheprotectar.ca. Number 2, you can take a free workshop where you will discover the 10 insights violent criminals don't want you to know. To take this workshop, head to workshop.awakentheprotectar.ca. The third way is to head to my website and check out all of my freeline programs that cover everything from mindset to strategies. To check us out, go to awakentheprotectar.ca. And finally, leave a 5-star review so that we can reach more good people like you who are ready to weaponize and rise regardless.